host, Kelly Berry. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to share with me. Got a lot coming at your way, including the upcoming weekend, a couple of big games in college football, the NFL. Take a look at the hunt for October, which is in full swing. But first off, my roommate here at college is an RA. And he said, hey, if you want to earn some housing points so you don't have to live in a cruddy old dorm on campus next year, why not come to this social event? You can earn some housing points and hopefully your name will be drawn to get into an apartment or something, because basically the way the system works, as he explained it, was the more social events you go to, the more housing points you get. The more housing points you get, the better your chances of winning the housing lottery and getting your pick as to where you stay. That's basically how it works. Makes sense, right? So his social event was the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. premiere. That has got to be the worst hour spent of my entire life. Alright, and I'm just going to go ahead and spare you now. If you haven't seen the show, first off, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a TV show derived loosely off of the Avengers movie, where the guy who pretty much fakes his own death is the lead actor in this like secret agent whatever. It's a very, very not well thought out, not very intelligent, not very original plot line, but still, you can have non-original plot lines, make successful TV shows. This was crap. Just absolute crap. It was, I wanted to shoot myself. It was so bad. And to make matters worse, like, there were only 6 people that showed up to it. And the 2 guys that are sitting next to me think it's like the best thing that they've ever seen in their entire lives. And they're basically having a metaphorical orgasm over this cruddy, pathetic TV show just because it's got a few explosions and a couple of cheesy pickup lines or whatever. And I wanted to look at him and go, guys, you're in the theater department here. You should have an appreciation for good entertainment only. But then again, they don't, and that's probably why our theater department here sucks. But anyway, that's another rant that I'm not going to get into, because that would take an entire show in and of itself to explain just how pitiful our theater department here is. But the lead actor, Clark Craig, he's a good actor, I think. I think he was miscast for this role. I think the entire show shouldn't exist, but if they were going to make this show, I think it should have been somebody besides him. And the reason why is because there are some people in this world who are great secondary, or in his case of the Avengers, tertiary actors or actresses that should not ever be in a leading role ever. Orlando Bloom is a good example of this, okay? He's a great supporting actor. If you want to say he's great at anything, I personally don't, but if you want to say he's great at anything, he's a great supporting actor. The movie Elizabethtown was a bombshell because he was the lead and it sucked. There are some people that have absolutely no business in leading. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers announced that they are no longer going to start Josh Freeman, sorry. Mike Glennon is going to be the new starter, the rookie out of Syracuse that they drafted in the 3rd round. Jeff Saturday, ESPN NFL analyst and former center for the Indianapolis Colts whenever Peyton Manning was still there, was brought in to SportsCenter to say something about this issue. And first off, there aren't that many centers that I would give credit for, that I would pay attention to what they were saying about a quarterback. I'm going to pay attention anytime Jeff Saturday says anything about a quarterback. And the reason why is because he played with the best quarterback in the modern era, and possibly the best quarterback that's ever played the game for a long time. He knows something about quarterbacks. He said, quote, "I'm not surprised. I think Freeman played his way into getting benched. Worst completion percentage, worst QBR. He's lost 8 of his last 9 games. He's 0-3 this season. He's earned this. He has not played well enough to keep carrying this football team, close quote. And as for the Bucks, he also said, anytime you make a change, you can make a spark, there's new energy. And he, being Mike Glennon, doesn't have to go out and win football games. He just has to be productive and manage the game well. And he's right, okay? He's right on 2 things, all right? He's right on Freeman's inability to lead this team, and he's right on what Glennon has to do to lead this team. Freeman was terrible, folks. And it showed based on the offense's production. They are the 2nd worst scoring offense in the country, 34 points total. Okay, just to put that in perspective, Denver is averaging 8 more points per game than Tampa Bay has had all season long. They have one of the best running backs in the country. One of the most underrated number 1 receivers in the country. I'm talking about Doug Martin at running back and Vincent Jackson at wide receiver. Yet Josh Freeman is absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. He's completing less than 46% of his passes. 571 yards over 3 games. That's pathetic. 2 touchdowns over 3 games. That's pathetic. He has 3 interceptions. He's also fumbled the ball 4 times. They're 31st in passing offense and total offense. His quarterback rating is 26.8. This guy sucks this year. And he has no business being a starting quarterback. Much like Clark Craig has no business being a lead role in anything. Adam Schefter also commented, Adam Schefter being an ESPN NFL insider, commented on Josh Freeman saying, when you go back to the offseason, it became very apparent that Freeman had to play well to keep his job. That's obvious. Anytime you use a high draft pick to get a quarterback, when you already have a quarterback, that tells the quarterback you already have, hey, your time is limited, so you better play well right now. Freeman hasn't, that's why he's no longer starting. And as for Mike Glennon, Schefter said he's got a lot of arm, a lot of talent, and the Buccaneers want to see what he can do. I say, why not? I mean, chances are Tampa Bay's not going to make a playoff push of any kind. They lack a lot of talent in a bunch of areas. The offensive line is terrible. There's no real receiving threat outside of Vincent Jackson. Doug Martin needs some help in the backfield so he just doesn't get beat up. The defense is okay in the secondary, but really not that great anywhere else. So it's not like this team's going to suddenly make a playoff push, regardless of the quarterback. And in fact, Mike Glennon probably won't win any more games this year than Josh Freeman would have. So why start him? You start him because he's the young guy. He's the guy you've dubbed as the quarterback of the future. And if you're going to dub him as the quarterback of your future and your team is already terrible anyway, you may as well give him some experience so when you can add pieces around him, he'll be ready. As far as some other NFL news, there's only one matchup of unbeaten teams, Miami at New Orleans. Miami is 3-0, and the interesting thing about Miami is, first off, I don't think anybody in the country outside of Miami saw them being 3-0 at this point. And honestly, when you look at the box score, they shouldn't be 3-0. They've been outgained offensively every single game they've played. Against Atlanta, they didn't even have 200 yards. And yet they still win. Now, it's admirable that they've won so many games that have been so close. Their biggest win margin has been 13 at Cleveland. At the same time, there are some very, very big concerns. Outside of the big threat of Mike Wallace, there's really not a big threat on this team. Brian Tannehill's still very young. The defense has been good this year, but not great. The offensive line has surrendered, I believe, 14 sacks on the year. That's a lot. Okay? Meanwhile, New Orleans comes into this game. And the Saints have always had a good offense. They have a good offense this year. Okay, and don't let the fact that they only scored 23 against Atlanta in week 1 and 16 against Tampa Bay alarm you. This is still a very potent offense, folks. Very, very potent. But their defense is what's got them to this point. Last year, that defense was absolutely horrendous. Just broke every single bad record you could possibly think of. And this year, they bring in Rob Ryan as the defensive coordinator. They're 4th in total defense, giving up 296 yards a game. They're 4th in passing defense, giving up 184 yards a game. And they're 5th in scoring defense, giving up only 12.7 points a game. Their defense has given up 38 points on the year. Over 3 games. That's a significant improvement, folks. And then on the other side, you have Drew Brees, you have Darren Sproles, you have Pierre Thomas, you have Mark Ingram, all right, the three-headed monster in the backfield. You have Jimmy Graham, you have Marquise Colston, Robert Meacham's back. This offense is loaded, and now suddenly the defense is good. So this game, despite its bid on Monday Night Football, despite its bid on the only matchup of the unbeatens, it's not going to be close. I'm taking the Saints 31-14, and it probably won't even feel like that close of a contest. Some other games coming up that you should probably pay attention to. Can the 49ers finally get on track? Last week against Indianapolis was supposed to be their vengeance game. They're at home. They only scored 3 at Seattle. They were supposed to come in pissed off. And what do? They give up, they get what, 7 points? That's it. That's pathetic. This game has all of the makings, though, of a coming out party for Kaepernick and company, and here's why. They're way too good of an offense to have only scored 10 points over the last 2 games. Way too good. And plus, the Rams' defense is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Go back and look up just how bad Julio Jones and Matt Ryan victimized this defense. Kaepernick's going to run all over them, throw all over them. They probably won't even have to throw the ball in the second half. I'm going to take San Francisco 38-7. And again, much like the New Orleans and Miami game, this one probably won't even feel that close. The other major game, there are actually 2 more games that I'm really paying attention to this week. Could the Giants drop to 0-4 and the Chiefs thus become 4-0? And honestly, I'm in a quandary. I'm not really sure which one of those is more surprising. The Giants being 0-3 or the Chiefs being 3-0. And on one hand, you have the Giants who they have had past success. And on the other hand, you have the Chiefs who have basically had no success. But after thinking about it, and after reading about it, and after talking and deliberating and arguing with myself about it, I don't think it's very surprising that the Giants are 0-3. I really don't. And neither does ESPN's reporter for the Giants, Dan Graziano, who basically came out and said the Giants are terrible. To put it in his terms, quote, "These Giants are a hollowed out facade of what they once were. They have some nice looking skill position guys, but they don't have enough good players at key positions that would allow them to dictate." And he also said they are not an underachieving team. Super Bowl winners a couple of years ago, now 0-3, not an underachieving team. He says they are not an underachieving team. They are one of the worst teams in the NFL. And I buy that. I buy that because he covers them. I buy that because he knows what he's talking about. And I buy that because based on what I've seen and what everybody else has seen from this team, they suck. That offensive line is more porous than Swiss cheese. Or Cincinnati's bats last night against the Mets. Their running game, absolutely not there. David Wilson is not a number one running back in the league. He's just not. And this offensive line could block whenever defenses had to honor the Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw duo in the backfield. They don't have to honor a running game anymore. Because the moment the running back touches the ball, he's probably going to fumble anyway. So all they have to do is come ears pinned back, hell wreaking havoc on Eli Manning. And they don't even really have to blitz because the offensive line is that bad. And Eli is poor guy. I can't remember the last time I felt this sorry for a quarterback. Maybe David Carr back in the early Houston days. People say he makes too many mistakes. If you had a combined weight of like 750 pounds in your face after 2 seconds every time you touch the ball, because he's not having to just get away from one guy. He's having to get away from 2, 3, sometimes 4 dudes. I've never felt this sorry for a quarterback outside of David Carr in my life. I just haven't. And you can say he has too many turnovers. Yes, he has too many turnovers. But the offensive line isn't giving him time to do anything about it. The Giants are terrible. Now, they're not Jacksonville terrible, but they're pretty terrible. And on the flip side, Kansas City, while not having an offense that's going to run anybody out of the building, has a defense that's phenomenal. They lead the league in sack. All right, just in Houston, their outside linebacker has 7.5 sacks this year over 3 games. He's got more sacks this year than half the teams in the NFL. He's on pace to break Michael Strahan's single-season sack record in 9 games. 9 games. Actually, to tie it in 9 games. So beat it in like 9.25. It's insane, folks. Absolutely insane. Alex Smith doing everything he needs to do. All right, this is the perfect team for Alex Smith. Good running backs, decent receiving core, offensive line's pretty good, and a defense who's not going to force him to win the game. Now, granted, they haven't played exactly the world's stoutest competition yet. But the Giants aren't that either. So Kansas City is going to probably win this game, I'm going to say 28-13. And Andy Reid gets another win over the Giants. He got a win over the Cowboys last week, a win over the Giants this week. It's going to be like he's coaching in the NFC East all over again. The only other game I can't even say I'm looking forward to this game. In fact, I'm actually the exact opposite of looking forward to this game because it's going to be, it would be like a nude photo shoot of 2 90-year-old ladies. All right, it's just going to be the most unglamorous, unsophisticated game ever, and that's Pittsburgh and Minnesota. Both of these teams have shown that they're absolutely terrible. Just absolutely terrible. There's absolutely no beauty in either one of their games. Pittsburgh's defense has shown us all that they are really old. They are really, really old. Okay, their average defensive starter is nearly 30. 29.7 years old to be exact. So you got to think the average starter is 5 years away from the average year of retirement. And that's with guys like William Gay and Ryan Clark who aren't really that old. I mean, the entire defensive line is basically near retirement. Troy Polamalu is near retirement. James Harrison's already no longer there, and even if he was, he's old and declining. Casey Hampton's not there either, but even if he was, he's old and declining. Another young guy is Ziggy Hood. All right, there's not anybody on this team who doesn't have at least a couple of wrinkles, and a lot of them are nearing retirement, and they're showing it. Meanwhile, Minnesota is just terrible. All right, they have Adrian Peterson on offense, and they have Jared Allen on defense, and that's it. But I'm still taking Minnesota. And the reason why is because Pittsburgh's defense hasn't been that good this year. Case in point, they gave up 40 to Chicago, and Chicago's a good offense. They're not a 40-point on the road against any other team good. Pittsburgh's defense is terrible. Their run defense is terrible. Matt Forte had all sorts of holes to run through, especially in the first half. Look for Adrian Peterson to gouge them. Gouge the steel, it used to be the steel curtain. Now it's probably like the lace strand, or the lace strand defense. The really old and wrinkly lace strand defense. Look for Adrian Peterson to show up on SportsCenter a couple of times. I'm going to say the Vikings win this one 21-13. So that covers the Sunday of the upcoming weekend, and in the case of Miami and New Orleans, the Monday of the upcoming weekend. Yes, Monday is still a weekend for those of us who like football, dang it. What about Saturday? College football. And actually this week, unlike last week, which was an absolute snooze fest, I wanted to just fall asleep. Last week was so boring. It was like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was just completely terrible in every way, shape, and form. You have Louisville winning by 72 against Florida International, and then you have Ohio State beating the esteemed Florida A&M University 76-0. Big whoop. I'm pretty sure I could find a high school team that could beat Florida A&M, for crying out loud. But anyway, this week we actually have some good games, and it starts with what I think is going to be by far and away the best game of the season up to this point, other than maybe Texas A&M Alabama. And that is LSU at Georgia. 6th ranked Tigers, 9th ranked Dogs. As far as LSU is concerned, and as far as this game is concerned, first off, let me just say the game, it's going to come down to quarterback play. Whoever has the better quarterback in this game is going to win the game. Both teams' running backs are pretty even. I would give a slight edge overall in the rushing attack to LSU. But then again, Georgia's probably got the best running back in Gurley. So that pretty much evens out. Both teams' receiving core evens out. Both teams' defenses are pretty even. So it's going to come down to quarterback play. Mettenberger is coming to his own. He's completing 65% of his passes. He's thrown for over 1,000 yards. He's thrown for 10 touchdowns against only 1 pick. And he's finally incorporating, and LSU has finally learned to incorporate one of the most underrated offensive talents of late in the SEC, and that's Odell Beckham Jr., who by far and away is the best skill position player in this game. His ability to catch away from his body on a consistent basis and to contort himself, take in the ball, secure it, and then take contact and still hold on to the pigskin is utterly phenomenal. He has 20 catches this year, 389 yards. Nearly 20 yards a touch, 4 touchdowns. This offense is averaging 38.3 points a game. Now granted, their only stout competition has really come against TCU. But still, to see LSU finally put some points on the board has got to be encouraging for Tiger Nation. Meanwhile, Georgia, also a very good offense, averaging over 41 points a game. Aaron Murray, completing 72% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks, over 1,000 yards through the air. Murray is the more skilled quarterback and the more proven quarterback of the two in this game. So the edge has got to go to Murray, but hang on a second. Murray has one glaring weakness in his game. There's only one, but it's a big one. And it's a monkey on his back that he can shake off if he wins this week. And that is his inability to play consistently in big games. So far, this team has had 2 big games. One was against Clemson. They ended up losing 38-35. And the other was against South Carolina at home, where they ended up winning 41-30. Aaron Murray plays much better at home than away. So even if he does win this game, and I think that they will, even if he does win this game, the monkey won't completely be gone. I still think he has to win at least one big game on the road for me to officially say this guy is the best quarterback in the country heading forward. And by forward, I mean into the draft. I'm talking NFL potential. Like I said, I think Murray's the better quarterback of the two. He's the more proven quarterback of the two, but that one glaring weakness is still there, and LSU is a pretty good defense. They're probably a better defense than Clemson. If not, pretty even kill. Despite that fact, and despite the fact that Murray struggled a little bit in that game, I'm taking the Dogs 34-31 in a game that's going to be absolutely phenomenal to watch. 2 other top 25 matchups. We start with Wisconsin at Ohio State. Now, the interesting thing about this game is Braxton Miller, as of earlier this week, is supposed to start. As you know, he hasn't started since week 1. Got that concussion. Or was it week 1 or week 2? Either way, it's been a little bit since he's seen the field. So their backup has come in and has done pretty well. He has 13 touchdowns, 643 yards, has led his team to 170 points over the last 3 games. So what? I mean, there are some people that are just absolute suckers for big stats. These are the people that go head over heels down a proverbial hill for teams like Baylor. They haven't played anybody. Show me you can score against a big name team, and I'll give you respect. Otherwise, you're just beating up on lesser competition. Anybody can do that. I reference once again Florida International coming in and getting their butts kicked by Louisville, and last week Ohio State just pounding the heck out of Florida A&M. But this game is going to be very interesting for one major reason. Both teams really, really like to run the football, but they have different ways of doing it. Wisconsin, who's the better rushing team on paper and averaging nearly 350 yards on the ground a game, they do it by throwing 3 different guys at you, led by Melvin Gordon, who averages over 150 yards a game. Meanwhile, the Buckeyes do it by having a good running back core, yes, but throwing mobile quarterbacks at you and playing this option read offense, and just when you think that you've keyed in on the run, they're going to throw it over you. Classic Urban Meyer, almost like he's coaching Tim Tebow all over again when he's got Braxton Miller on the field. In a contest, though, of 2 teams that average 300 yards or more on the ground per game, I'm still taking the undefeated Buckeyes, and I'm taking them 38-31. The main reason why is because I still think Braxton Miller is the best quarterback on this team. I don't think he's necessarily Heisman potential, but he's the best quarterback option for this team. And Ohio State plays a lot better at home. A lot better at home. The other one is Oklahoma and Notre Dame. Honestly, I don't even have a prediction for this game, because legitimately, I don't care. I just don't. I mean, I watched Oklahoma and West Virginia, and I about just slept because the game was so boring. I wanted to sit back and just 16-7. All right, I watch the when I want to watch a good defensive game, I watch the SEC because I know both teams have good defenses. When I watch the Big 12, I expect good offensive play because nobody in the Big 12 has a good defense. So when I see a score in a game that features no good defenses that's 16-7, that tells me both offenses are pitiful. And that's the case. And Notre Dame, while they have a better offense than West Virginia, it's not by a lot. It's not by a lot. So if I were you, unless you're an Irish fan or a Sooner fan, don't watch this game. Don't watch this game. Do something better with your Saturday. If it's between that and going to your wife's family's house and enjoying a weekend of cooking out, go spend time with family. Seriously, do not waste time with this game. I didn't even waste time making a prediction for it. As far as the in-state is concerned, last week taught me many things. First and foremost, I am a genius. I am a genius. Okay, I've said from the get-go, Western Kentucky is a running team. Running team. And it took Bobby Petrino 4 weeks longer than it took me to figure that out. But he finally figured it out, dang it. And Antonio Andrews looked like the running back that could be a dark horse for the freaking Heisman. It was amazing. They beat the crap out of Morgan State, and I could not have been happier. Andrews has been screaming for these kinds of touches, and he finally got him. And in my mind, he could run even more. He only had 17 rushing attempts last week, but he ran for 213 yards. Honestly, that's probably why he only had 17 touches. Because one, you get that tired when you cover that much ground, and two, after you have one guy that rushes for 5 touchdowns and 3 in the first quarter, it's kind of unfair to keep giving him the ball. But either way, he got a Capital One Cup Impact Performance of the Week nomination. And honestly, it's not a fluke. This guy could do this against anybody he plays. Now, he won't average over 10 yards a carry against anybody he plays because Morgan State, let's face it, they're pretty bad. But he's definitely, in my opinion anyway, a Sunday running back. And if my prediction tells me anything, if my prediction ability tells me anything, if my insight on Western tells me anything, I at least know more about their team than their own coach, at least offensively. I can't rip Petrino that bad. I like him. But let's be honest, I don't think he fully realized he wasn't coaching that offense of Louisville that just slung the ball around everywhere. Brian Dowdy's not Brian Brom. All right, and he finally figured it out. It took him a little while, yes, but he finally figured it out. They have an interesting game coming up this week, though. They play Navy. And the reason this game is interesting is Navy has that triple option offense. They're number 1 in the country in rushing yards per game, as they usually are. It's either them or Georgia Tech, it seems like, every year. So Navy likes to run the ball, and they're a purist style rushing attack. And by that, I mean they're not going to pass the ball. They may do it, I don't know, they may have 5, 10 passes this game. Meanwhile, Western Kentucky has a more traditional style where they're just going to pound it down your throat, but they're going to make you play honest. I think Western wins this game, though. They've got a lot of momentum. They just beat Morgan State. They need to touch up this offense a little bit more before they head into their full slab of Sun Belt play. And I think they do it. I think Antonio Andrews has another solid day. Give him probably 150 yards plus on the ground, a couple of scores. And I think Western wins this game 35-24. Meanwhile, you have Louisville and Temple. Louisville, another team I was thoroughly pleased with last week. I've said numerous times on this show, despite the gaudy numbers of this offense, they haven't really looked that solid, and the rushing attack hasn't really been there consistently. Now, it was there. Finally. Bridgewater looked like his old self. The rushing attack looked like its old self, averaging 7.2 yards a touch. And Bridgewater he's no longer a Heisman dark horse. Folks, he's thrown over 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns this year. In 4 games. And the defense. Oh my God, the defense. Folks, last week, alright, and I know FIU is not a perennial offensive threat by any stretch of the imagination. But there comes a point when you hold a team to 30 total yards offensively, you give yourself a high five and a pat on the back because you just did one hell of a job. And that's what they did. 30 total yards, 1 first down. It's insane. It's utterly insane. And Temple, though they're probably better than FIU, not by much. I'm going to take Louisville in this game to roll on the road, 52-10. And I'm going to say half of the Temple crowd is gone by midway through the 3rd quarter. They leave about the same time probably that Bridgewater leaves the game. And not because of injury, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like Charlie Strong is just going to be like, enough is enough. And the final in-state game is Kentucky and Florida. Now, Florida is going to be playing their 2nd string running back. Florida actually has statistically a worse offense in every way, shape, and form than Kentucky. So you might be thinking that I'm going to say something along the lines of, here comes Kentucky with a win, considering they've had a bye week to prepare for this game and they had such a great outing against Louisville. The Kentucky and Florida football game is kind of like Adair County High School's homecoming for their football team. Adair County High School, look, I've been doing the film work as part of my work study here at the college because my work study is in partnership between the college and a local cable station. And I have been doing film work for Adair County High School football games for the last now 4 years. And let me tell you something about Adair County High School football's homecoming. If you represent the FFA, the Future Farmers of America, it doesn't matter how ugly you look or how retarded your dress is, you are going to be the homecoming queen and get to wear that fancy little crown and go, I'm the homecoming queen, and have something to put on your resume that probably doesn't include anything else. I feel like there are times, seriously, when Adair County, the FFA could be represented by a pig, and it would win. Florida is kind of like an ugly pig this year, compared to what they could be, compared to what they usually are. And despite all of the chances that Kentucky's probably going to have to win this game, they're not going to. Because just like FFA, no matter who you put out there, is always going to get the homecoming queen nomination, Florida is always going to beat Kentucky, and that's just how it is. This pen will always fall to the table whenever I drop it. FFA will always win the Adair County Homecoming Queen, and Florida's football team will always beat Kentucky. That's just how it is. Gator Chomp this week, 31-14, Florida. And there's a professor here too that's a big Florida fan, so it just kills me. Just absolutely tears away at my soul to say that they're gonna beat us again. It's just gonna happen. You know, for Kentucky fans, wait a couple of years for this football team to get better, or wait until basketball season and they probably win a national championship and you can forget about all the suffering that comes from Florida beating your football team for like the 28th straight year. Major League Baseball. As I said at the beginning of the show, I'm going to get into it. Here it is. All right, the hunt for October is on, and it has been fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic. The New York Yankees eliminated from the playoffs. And honestly, like, I'm not a Yankees fan by any stretch of the imagination. And every single year, I've rooted against the Yankees to make the playoffs. I don't like Alex Rodriguez. Derek Jeter's overrated. Mark Teixeira is overrated. Pretty much everybody on the team is overrated, let's be honest. In saying that, though, there are a couple of likable characters. Ichiro Suzuki. Love the guy. He's just a workhorse. He's like 40 years old and he's still sliding around the outfield making catches and then running the bases like he's a 13-year-old. And you can tell he's loving it. Mariano Rivera had his jersey retired. The last player probably that's ever going to be allowed to wear the number 42 had his jersey retired in Yankee Stadium. His last year. Andy Pettit's last year. And it's basically a no-name team, and suddenly, out of nowhere, I start finding myself actually pulling for the Yankees. I hate the Yankees. What's going on with me? I'm having like this internal conflict. It's like, the one year I actually pull for the Yankees is the one year they do absolutely nothing. That's my luck in baseball, I guess. This is why I wasn't a baseball fan for the longest time. It's because Cincinnati did nothing, and everybody that I liked did nothing. But anyway, the New York Yankees eliminated. Meanwhile, the AL wildcard race has finally come down officially to 3 teams. You have Tampa Bay and Cleveland, and then a game back from those is Texas. Now, I've said before, I'll say it again. Texas is a good team, but they have slipped badly over these last month or so. So my prediction for the AL playoff seeding, number 1, Boston. They're by far and away, I believe, the most rounded and the best team in the baseball season this year. Then you have Oakland, who is still probably the most underrated team of the season. Detroit at number 3, and then the wild card play-in game, Tampa Bay hosting Cleveland. The race to keep an eye on is the number 2 spot. The Oakland A's have lost 2 straight. The Detroit Tigers have won 2 straight. Right now, Oakland leads by 1 game with 3 to go. It's going to be a tight race. I think Oakland ends up winning it, but they don't have a lot of room to fool around. Meanwhile, the National League. All 5 playoff teams are in. The playoff landscape as far as teams are concerned is locked up. And right now the standings, St. Louis, number 1. A half game ahead of Atlanta. I'll get to that here in a minute. Number 2, Atlanta. Number 3, the Dodgers. Number 4, Pittsburgh. And number 5, Cincinnati. St. Louis in first right now. Atlanta, a half game back. And they're 2 ahead of the Dodgers for second. The race to keep an eye on here. Obviously the number 1 spot. Obviously. Alright, because you have to ask yourself if Atlanta is slipping once again late in the season. And then you have to ask yourself, are the Cardinals really this good? My answer is yes, they are. I believe they are. They've got a great pitching staff. They've got one of the best bullpens in baseball, and they've got an offense that's good enough to go out and consistently get 4, 5, 6 runs in a game. And baseball, more than any other sport, its bare necessity is consistency. And this is why teams like Cincinnati, why teams like Pittsburgh are never going to win the World Series with the teams that they have. They have good players. They have good potential. They don't have consistency. And that's why you see St. Louis ahead of them in the standings. My prediction right now, St. Louis number 1, Atlanta number 2, the Dodgers number 3, and I actually have Cincinnati ahead of Pittsburgh. Cincinnati took 2 games from the Pirates in Pittsburgh just about a week ago. Now they come back to Great American, and the Reds are one of the best home teams in baseball. But still, that will be an interesting 3-game series to watch by merit, just because it will basically decide who or where the play-in game is played, unless for some reason St. Louis flubs up, loses 3 straight, and then Pittsburgh wins 3 straight at Cincinnati. Don't think that's going to happen. Look, the Cards are playing the Cubs. I think anybody could get at least 1 win against the Cubs in a 3-game series. But anyway, definitely a good weekend to watch. It's going to be a better weekend, at least Saturday, as far as I'm concerned, than last Saturday. Last Saturday was a snooze fest. It was boring. And it didn't help that last school week was just so long. And I wanted some good college football games, and instead I got Louisville beating the hell out of Florida International. There should be some better games this week, though, folks. I'm really looking forward to LSU and Georgia. That's going to be my game of the week in college. Then in the NFL, there are a lot of good games in the NFL this week too. Do not watch Pittsburgh and Minnesota. Don't subject yourself to that kind of torture. The college game that I told you not to watch was Oklahoma and Notre Dame. Don't do it. Spend time with your in-laws. And keep up with some baseball if you have the stomach for it. I'll be back hopefully early next week. We're having a little bit of issues with camera possession and availability, but I'll try and have a show for you to wrap up this weekend and look ahead to next weekend somewhere around Monday or Tuesday. Keep an eye on that. Look at the page for some announcements. But until then, I hope that you all have a great weekend. I hope that I have a great weekend. Hope that you all have a better weekend, though. Take care, everybody.